So I'd like to invite questions today rather than giving a Dhamma talk. I'd like to hear what's up for you in your practice, what you'd like to hear about or discuss.
I think I'd like to discuss fear, fear of the future, fear, yeah.
Fear of the future. Thank you. Yeah.
Could I chime in with that? Because I was going to say fear versus, not versus, but the difference between fear, which is very biological, and being scared, which is well, that's my question. Like, what is the difference?
It's interesting. Anyone else? Any nuances on the topic?
Well, I suppose you could tie this into the Metta Sutta.
Who spoke there? I didn't see that. Alan. Hi, Alan. Yeah. Yeah, Mayra.
Sorry, I turned up the video because I haven't eaten. I appreciate the question. Lynn and I had a difficult thing happen recently, and it just got stimulated at the beginning of the meditation. And it goes along with the fear subject because my body got super afraid. And we would love to be able to talk a little bit about that tonight, what's been happening. So that would be amazing.
Okay.
I'm going to turn off the video screen again, though, until. Oh, are you okay? Yes. You sure?
Yes.
Okay. Did you want to say something?
And Nikki?
Well, I'd like to talk about fear from the vantage of it's not going to go away. Our world, I don't believe in my lifetime will quiet down. And so part of what I'm working on learning is this is my companion and it's an intimate companion. And so an intimate companion that won't go away.
Okay. Yeah, and Anne, yeah, hi Anne.
Hi. So this is a little existential, but in listening to Ayya Santusika recently, and my fear of my fear of dying is about, it came to me that it's really about clinging to life. I mean, I have no reason to be dying shortly, but it's like, I just need to relax into the fact that that's sort of a clinging to not being able to continue to do the things that I love doing. I mean, that's really so if that fits in with fear, that's great. If not, I'm still cogitating it. So
That's a great word. Okay. Yeah, fear it's it is part of having a physical body. Every mammal, every animal experiences fear, and we are part animal. And it has a function, obviously. Fear is when we're afraid of if there's somebody that's dangerous or something that's actually dangerous, then to have fear is suitable. Makes us alert. It gets the adrenaline going. It can save our life in certain situations. So it's part of being alive. Is built into the system. And then there's I guess there's layers of it because there are fears. There's fear based on our conditioning. Maybe certain things have happened in our personal life or even in our culture that feel threatening. And what's threatening in one culture might be not threatening in another culture. That was, for me, very interesting living in Amravati when there were people from quite a variety of different cultures, mostly European and American and Australian and in New Zealand. And a little bit of, and also some Thai and occasionally Sri Lankan. So there's a sort of a mix of cultures, and what was comfortable and safe in one culture was scary and confusing in another culture, and vice versa. So you'd have the cultures where being very understated and sort of not saying things directly was a safe thing. That was comfortable and safe for some people. Then for other people, that was really confusing. To not say things directly was very confusing and distressing, because you didn't know what was going on, what's what. And then there'd be the people who would just say things really sort of blatantly, and that was comfortable and safe for some people, and for others it felt threatening. So the fear was related to fear and comfort, let's say, related to personal conditioning. So that might be, in one's family, or it might be cultural also. And that's tricky, because a whole culture may have a shared conditioning, and they'll all agree, yes, that is scary, or yeah, that is more comfortable, and it is within a certain context, but you move out of that context and it all changes. So this is one of the conundrums of being human, and in a time when we can move around a fair bit, and that can be on a sort of a base level of is this person safe? Are they going to be? Is their behavior going to be? Is it threatening? Am I going to experience harm? And those things can be really deep, even if there's no harm actually about to happen. If it's just ways of being, we can experience that fear and distrust and trepidation when somebody's behaving in a way that's very different to what our cultural norm is, or is touching into a deep fear or danger that we've experienced either in our own life or in our sort of ancestral lineage. So there's that. And then there's the reality of the world we're living in at this time, where there are a lot of very big weapons. There's an incredible lessening of accountability in relation to weapons. So there's things can be done by drones, or by like things can be set up technologically. So there's no sort of direct accountability in the way that there would have been at one time. And there's some very confused people with a lot of power in this world. A lot of worldly power. So that could be pretty scary. Rightly so. It's volatile. And then there's just the basic fear of death, which is an interesting one. In some ways, it's sort of built into our system. That's why we have fear, because it helps us to stay alive longer, because we check things out, we're more careful. And if you look at any creatures in nature, most creatures, I think maybe the deer in Port Townsend might be an exception, but most animals, wild animals, they're looking around, they're checking. Birds, they'll always be looking. And most creatures, unless they're really at the top of the food chain, will be checking out for danger. That's a natural process. There's a level of fear and a level of adrenaline in the system that's, in a sense, keeping us safe, keeping them safe. So that's natural, and we're wired to protect ourselves, and not to put ourselves in dangerous situations. And yet the fact is we're going to die. There's no escaping death. As the Buddha puts it, it's as though a mountain range was rolling in from the north, and another mountain range is rolling in from the west, and another from the south, and another from the east, and they're all rolling in to this one point. Is there any way that we can avoid getting crushed by those mountains? There's no way. And this is the same with death. Death is rolling in from all sides. There's no way around it. There's no way to avoid it. And as long as we haven't accepted that reality, then we're going to be afraid of death. We won't, I know, quite a lot of people actually in my place where I grew up and in my sort of younger years, before I was sort of deeply into Buddhism or around so many Buddhists, where just even to speak of death, even just to say the word death was a terrible thing. And it was seen as something really, really, really scary and something not to invite in any way. You've got to try and keep it away. And of course, we don't want to invite it either, but it is part of life. So there is a peacefulness that is found through coming to terms with the reality of our own death that hasn't happened yet this time around, but it will. And we don't know when that will happen. We don't know how it will happen. We don't know where it will happen, but it has to happen. So I think the real fear, one of the really biggest fears, is of the unknown. So it's not so much that we're afraid of. It might be that we're afraid of dying, but we don't know what dying is really. We don't really know what that means. And sometimes we might be more afraid of the pain that happens before death, or the vulnerability that we may have to go through before dying. I know of one very deep meditator, very deep practitioner, who's done a lot of contemplation of death and really, really dove into that whole practice a lot. And then recognized, between now and death, there's aging. There's the aging process, which could go on for a really long time. And that was actually, in some ways, harder than accepting just that moment of death and the reality of death. So so the vulnerability of being in these bodies where we feel separate and we are vulnerable. So that's true and real. And on another level, it isn't real. This is the irony, the paradox. So on one level, we are separate and we do have to protect ourselves, and we are definitely vulnerable. And then on another level, we're part of everything all the time. This body is constantly being nourished by the fruits of the earth and by the breath that's also purified by the algae and trees and grasses, and being shared with other beings. And we're nourished by the waters of the earth, of the world, and warmed by the sun, cooled in the shade. So these exchanges are going on all the time. And the more we're identified as a separate somebody, the more scary it is, the more we experience fear. Because from the perspective of being a separate somebody, it is a bit scary, we're vulnerable. we will experience loss, and including the loss of this body. That's just the way it is. And we'll experience loss of our loved ones, of our health, our youth, maybe faculties, memory, eyesight, hearing, taste buds, all those things, So that's kind of how it goes. And sometimes I think that the way nature has designed this, it's like we have this, we come into birth as a little baby, all open and kind of bright, shiny, and learn things. We grow and we learn to fear because it's part of what keeps us alive. And then we go through our life, and we might live a really long time, and we might have been afraid of all kinds of things in our life, but here we are still. So that's something to contemplate. All of the fears that we've had, and yet we're still here. So whatever we've been afraid of, either our fear has guided us in the right direction, or it's been kind of in the way, unnecessary. And then as we get older, we lose some of the things that we've identified as. Maybe our physical form changes beyond what was once recognizable. And certain, maybe memory doesn't work so well, eyesight, hearing, all those things. Movement, flexibility, all of those things can be lost. And then gradually, if we live to be really old, if we die of old age, let's say, I'm not sure if that's even considered a cause of death anymore, but sometimes we even go back to being like little babies again, where we're we need to wear a diaper, and we maybe even curled up. I've seen that with a few people, where you just end up, you just kind of curled up like when we came in, very vulnerable, and a little bit helpless. It can be like that. And I see that as a way, even though it's a huge thing to give up, it's a huge thing to sort of have to meet when we're an adult, who's had agency in our life. And we might be afraid of that. We might be afraid of losing, our mind, or losing our bodily functions, control over our bodily functions. We might have those fears. And yet the people I've been around who've gone through that process, there is a vulnerability, and yet it's kind of like preparing that person for letting go of the body, letting it go. So we have to let this body go, and we have to let this mind go, this personality, this person go. There is no way around that. But for now, this is what we got, and we make the best with what we've got. So in terms of fears there's a good reason to be afraid, when you look at the world powers and the pretty crazy trajectory that is going on right now. I think there's reason to be afraid, but fear might not be of much use to us in this process, actually. Even though rationally it's sort of makes sense, but it might not be that useful. And I was recently with this native elder, indigenous elder, who I'd heard about and watched a few videos of, and he came to Port Townsend and was giving some teachings here. His name's Ilarion Merkloff. I don't know how old he is. I think he's like around 80. And he was giving this encouragement, 3 things, which you may have heard me say before. 3 things. Be in the present. Be in the heart, or meet your experience from the heart, and let go of human attachment. So I think if you're in that, if you do that, if we do that, there's not so much room for fear. Be in the present. So maybe there's fear in the present about maybe we're thinking about the future and then we're afraid in the present. So then we meet that fear in the present. And then be in the heart, or come from the heart. And in a way that brings in what Alan was brought up around the Metta Sutta. Like the practice of metta, loving kindness. When it's really cultivated, there's no room for fear. It transforms fear. It sort of pushes fear out the way. So there's this, and it also brings us back to this place of interconnectedness, which is the truth of things. So being present, coming from the heart, and letting go of human attachment. That third one is, I think it's both difficult and very easy. It's something that we can do in the moment like that, and then we forget again and again. But I think that advice is really valuable for letting go of fear. So, thoughts about the future, anxiety, there's a major anxiety epidemics in the world at this time, and anxiety is very much connected with the future. Thinking about the future, worrying about the future, wanting things to be a certain way in the future. So fear is directly connected with wanting and not wanting. We want things to be a certain way, and so we're afraid that they're not going to be like that. Or we imagine things are going to be a certain way that we don't want, and so we fear that. And, all kinds of things can happen in a life. But if we can be present with what is happening, even really difficult things are just this. It's just this. So I think we also, we are in a time where I think wisdom and discernment are really important. I mean, always actually, but there are things that we need to be really careful around and savvy, and not go to sleep to the dangers that are present at this time. But at the same time, if we're really here and present with things as they are, and if we put our energy into our community, our own well-being, and then our community, and care for our mental health and physical health, and for the well-being of those around us as well. That's putting energy in the right direction, and that will look different for different people. There'll be different ways that people do that. And then our practice, like metta practice, is helping us to let go of this sense of separate self. It takes us in the right direction, and then it also brings us out of the fear into benevolence. Even for people in power with making terrible decisions, even for those who are terribly affected by that. And then there's a certain wisdom that can come through, because it doesn't, when we're afraid, we're not thinking straight. It's not a place of wisdom, clarity. Unless we're really, really present and it's a fear. I mean, there might be like, we're in a very dangerous situation and we're on the edge of fear, and that brings a sharpness and clarity. That can happen. But most of the time our fears are about ideas of the future or perceptions of others that may or may not be true. Yeah, and and just coming back to this one, the practice right here, knowing how fear feels in the body, where it is, where it resides, what it does, how it moves, where it hides. And then the breathing meditation that we were doing earlier, really feeling the whole of the body breathing. That's moving, like the organs are moving, the diaphragm, the lungs, the heart, the shoulders, the rib cage, maybe even the pelvis. It's like it can be, and the throat and sinuses and mouth. So it's like the whole body, excuse me, can be moving with the breath. And if our stomach is tight, if we're afraid and we're not very aware of it now, and we've got a tightening in the solar plexus or in the belly or in the chest or in the shoulders, any or all of those, then the breath can't really do its job. So if we shift from the tightness of the body into a presence and a recognition, and then an invitation for the breath to fully enter the body, to move our body, for the rhythm of the breath to move all the way down to the belly, all the way down to the pelvis, all the way out through the shoulders, the chest, the throat. Then that rhythm of the breath starts to soften things, softens the rigidity of fear. And then a metta practice also undoes fear. Fear is a contraction and a protection, and metta is an opening, an expansion, and an interconnection. So those are my thoughts on fear. It is a practice. It's a practice to know when it's present and to know how to meet it. And actually, another piece is fear is often very much associated with our thoughts, sankharas, with our thoughts and ideas and what we create, how we put things together. And then that affects our physical experience, and then it affects how we perceive the world. The whole thing gets rolling. So knowing a thought as a thought is, a sankhara, a fabrication, a creation, a putting together of things, recognizing how that happens, and how we really believe those things. That we can see, oh, I saw this, and then there's this, and there's this. I'm absolutely certain, and then there's this. And sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not true, or maybe some of it's true and some of it isn't. So moving away from the sankharas, the thoughts, the creations of the mind, into the direct experience, the embodied experience, and then letting letting the breath move and soften and undo the tightness.